Kelsey, welcome to the Flower Podcast.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I always love having designers and business owners on our podcast, but especially when I hear they're from New York, or not from New York, but they're in New York City, because I feel
I
like
am in
that's
New
the
York City.
exciting dynamic that goes on there with their flower district and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so before we jump into some meat, I just would love to hear just sort of some background of what your flower journey's been like. How did you get to where you are today?
So let's see. I'll start with pre-flowers just to give a little bit of like color and context to where I got to. Fresh out of high school, I did go to college, but I eventually dropped out. I spent 10 years working in the music industry, which
Okay.
was a wild, fun, and very poor ride for me. Poor as in financially. Uh, it's essentially if you like indie music, if you like working in like the indie rock scene, you are gonna be broke. I hate to break it to you. Maybe things are different now. I don't know. But anyway, I was super passionate about music and worked in the industry for 10 years. Absolutely loved it. But one day I just sort of was a burnout, maxed out. I couldn't do it anymore. And I was moving to New York, and I was trying to figure out what was next for me. And I had previously not to well, I guess a little bit after I moved to New York, I got married. Our wedding was in LA, but it was through the process of getting married and working with a friend of mine. Her name's Ruthie. Um, on the design aspect of the wedding that really kind of showed me, oh, I have this interest in taking a narrative and bringing it to life visually. Um, and that was sort of like my first little inkling into the design world. And once I decided to leave music, I started prop styling and doing some other more like creative gigs, to just
Uh-huh.
test things out. And I fell in love with styling. I thought that was really really fun. And then just as I was transitioning careers, I was like, you know what? Anthropology would be a really great company to start working for because I could meet some new people because it's retail. I'm new to New York and their stores are always really beautiful. So I started working retail at Anthropology, just like an in between thing. And I was working for Beholden, their bridal brand. And we needed flowers in the retail space because we were selling wedding dresses. And basically, through starting to go to the flower market and curate blooms for Beholden, I fell in love with, I fell in love with the New York City flower market. People ask me a lot of times, they're like, you're from California and the California flower market's the best, right? I'm like, okay, well, let's not apples and oranges. They're very different.
Yes.
But the New York City flower market, while it may be small, it is very mighty and has some of the most talented purveyors of blooms in the entire world. And I was just, struck by the selection there, and it really ignited this sort of like childlike wonder and excitement for me. Seeing seeing like Icelandic poppies for the first time, learning how to learning how to open a poppy was a whole other journey. I remember messaging one of my wholesalers at the time being like, they won't open. Even just admitting that out, he's like, yeah, you have to take the casing on the outside off. You need to, this like whole process. You learn so much by doing. But anyway, so it's really this combination of working for this visual creative company like Anthropology. At the time, I also had incredible mentors and bosses and different people that I worked for in that company. That company attracts a lot of very talented people when it comes to visuals, and it was really that and a combination of the New York City flower market that just like really enamored me with flowers, and that's how I got my start. um, and I kept working for Anthropology for a handful of years afterwards and went into merchandising with them. And I'm not classically trained as a florist. I learned everything I know about visual composition and color balance and color story and narrative all through my training at Anthro, which I don't know. I think it's gotten me to a pretty okay spot.
I think it
So
has too.
yeah, yeah.
It's interesting how so many people in our industry are self-taught, or their journey is what's equipped them in ways that has allowed them to really be unique and expressive in their own style. And I don't know, I just think that's exciting.
It is really exciting, and it's fun because not everybody, I mean, if I were new and interested, like new to flowers and interested, there are some amazing, there's McQueen's, there's New York Flower School, there's a lot of great options, but not everybody can afford those things, right? And so I think it's, and as I progressed, I've sought out education to further my knowledge, and I'm always learning. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Amy Nicole, but
Oh my
I
gosh,
mean,
yes.
yeah, she is a mentor to me and somebody that I've invested with, progressing my education and flower knowledge through her. And I think if you are not classically trained, that's a great leg up. If you are, that's also a great leg up. And I think it's great when we can utilize those strengths and weaknesses from both worlds. And I mean, even with me, I spend so much of my time running the business. I don't always get to touch flowers. And sometimes I'm like, hey, Amy, I think it's time for maybe a bouquet boot camp just for the two of us because I could brush up on my skills. I think some of my freelancers could probably run circles around me, especially with how quickly they do things. It's truly amazing, but there's so many ways that we can learn and so many ways that we can find our unique expression. And I think however you get to that point is also part of what is your unique makeup, like you were saying. And it's really fun. I think it gives everybody their each individual sort of special voice. It's really nice.
I love that. And Amy's so great, and talented teacher. And
She's so
I
great.
know she has helped so many people over the years. I'm excited to hear that you guys are connected because that doesn't actually
I
it
know.
doesn't surprise me when I see your work.
She
I mean, yeah. So
she's amazing. And I think there's a lot of different education platforms. There are a lot of different people teaching classes, and I think a lot of classes that are out there are a little more, I don't know, maybe she's just great if you're a professional designer, whether you own your own business or you're a freelancer. You can't always know with these classes and things that are available, like what's really worth the money. And I know that whatever product she's putting out, I'm like, I'll sign my name for that and pony up the dollars for that because she has the experience and the expertise to follow it up, and it's really nice. So I try to recommend her to as many people as I can because it is really, our industry is sort of like, it's so disconnected in a lot of ways. There isn't this like centralized place that people go for education or they go for resources. And when you find something you can really trust, it can be such a good resource.
mm.
So if you're out there looking for more flower training, this is not an ad for Amy Nicole / the flower coach, but it does sound like one.
It does, and I'm sure she'll be excited for your endorsement for sure. So, okay, so you were in anthropology. When did you
Mhm.
make the jump to go out on your own?
Well, when did I make the jump to go out on my own, or when did East Olivia become its own thing? Because those are two separate. They're two
Okay,
separate things.
well, you share it however you need to. I'm
Yeah.
just curious how, because so many people start, and it's interesting that not everybody has the plans initially to grow a business to like maybe
Mhm.
the size that you've grown yours, but then it still happens. And learning how to scale a business, learning how to those are things that not everybody thinks about when they're starting. So that's why I'm curious
Right.
in your journey how that parlayed a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I worked for anthropology for about 5 years, and I sort of moonlit and built East Olivia. I was a merchandiser. So what was great about that is that we either worked a typical shift was 7 to 4. So I was like, oh, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then I'll have all this time and all this energy. Thank God I was like still in my 20s now because that kind of energy I definitely don't have anymore. But yeah, so the shifts were 7 to 4, sometimes 6 to 3. And so, arguably I had time after work, and I'm pretty driven. I've been sort of an entrepreneur since I came out of the womb. Like my mom was a hairdresser, and like she's a barber and a master colorist, and she would often like have a chair somewhere, and I would usually come in and like, I don't know, I would find like DIY tutorials in a magazine for like beaded dragonfly barrettes, and I would make those and sell them at the front desk, or I'd sweep hair for tips from the other hairdressers. So I've always been entrepreneurial since I was a kid. And, even when I worked in the music industry, that sort of spirit about me kind of always came up, very much like self-starter and excited to, just, I don't know, a job description is fun, but why not do like five other things on top of it? Why not make things better where you can, if that's fun for you? So while I was working at Anthropologie, I started to build East Olivia. And one of the turning points, I would actually say this is a big turning point for us. I sent a cold email to Create and Cultivate, which I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's a conference that supports women, and their tagline is to support women to create and cultivate the career of their dreams. And Jacqueline Johnson's the founder. She's an amazing entrepreneur, and she's now a good friend of mine. And I saw this conference was coming to New York, and I was like, you know what? I should just send them an email and see if they want any flowers. And I was thinking, I was like, I'll be lucky if I get an email back. I got an email back. They're like, yes, we'd love you to do some flowers. This is so great. I was like, okay, wonderful. I'm thinking some arrangements or something, maybe something for the green room. They're like, we're doing a 10 by 8 or 10 by 12 suspended installation.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but they don't know that. So that, and I had been working at Anthro, and I was working with so many talented people in their like display department and stuff too. I was like, I bet I could figure this out. So that was sort of like what I was already interested in flowers. I was, doing flowers here and there on the side, but it was my first contract with Create and Cultivate, doing my first ever large scale installation. And it was a big suspended installation that said collaboration over competition. I just fell in love with it. I loved working with freelance designers and directing them, and then us all coming together to make this bigger vision come to life. So that really sparked me beyond just falling in love with florals. That really got me hooked on installations, which, if you're familiar with our work, you know this. If you're not, welcome. We do a lot of large scale installations. That's sort of like our bread and butter. It's like the thing that we really love to do. And I continued to work at Anthro another 3 years or so after that, just moonlighting at East Olivia. I loved my job at Anthro. And at some point, there was just a crossroads. It was like, okay, do I want to keep progressing with this larger company, and their home offices are in Philly? Do I have any interest in moving to Philly? Maybe not. And I think just the opportunities for East Olivia, that was really the only, I gotta say, I think it's maybe the only cold email I ever sent. Because after that, we just couldn't stop the inquiries from coming in. So I was either going to have to make a choice to shut down this business and go, only work for Anthro. And I'm not sure when I made that decision, but at some point I was like, you know what, I think I'm excited about making an impact in this industry, and also creating jobs for people that is really meaningful and something that is really exciting to me. And so I quit Anthropologie, and let's see, gosh, it's so hard to remember. The pandemic has put this like weird,
Oh my
I
gosh,
feel
time
like
warp.
thing in our brains where I don't even know what happened beforehand. But so I believe it was actually spring of 2019, and it was fall of 2018. So it was late winter, but 2019. And then in 2018 is when I hired my first 2 employees. So for all of you out there that moonlight or starting your business, I hired my 2 first employees before I hired myself. And I was tired. Let's not be wrong. But I realized that investing, it was a big risk to hire people, right? And so I kind of like, by having a full-time job, was able to have a little bit of a buffer there. And it also really shows me how important staff and team members are, and how important people are that come alongside you to help you, level up and go to the next level. Yeah, so that's a very long answer to your very short question. I'm sorry.
No, it's good, and I appreciated sort of the little high points that were woven in there, because it makes me think, that's a lot of times, when people go to start their business, they feel like they have to have all the answers. They just have to start, hang their shingle up, so to speak, and open their door. And hearing the transition between your your day job for, and sort of growing your business to a point to be able to hire two people before yourself to then, kind of help it get off the ground solidly before you made that transition. I think that's a brilliant idea. And, I always, when I'm having these conversations with guests, I'm always like, what does everybody out there want me to ask? And I think to myself, that had to be scary hiring those two people before yourself, but having that buffer is a great thing, and then making the jump. So were you looking for sales volume necessarily or business? What was the
Well,
determining factor that kind of pushed you over the edge to kind of
well, I
make
think
some of
I had
those
a
hard
hard time
choices?
leaving Anthro. I really loved it. And now I'm happy to say they're a client. They pretty much have been a client ever since I left. We just did the florals for their rock center tree lighting party, which is a party I used to throw, like do the programming for. This is like coming full circle. But I think it was really just at some point I like I said, I had to make that decision of, because I knew I wanted to bring my full self to something. So is it bringing my full self to anthropology, or is it bringing it to East Olivia? And it was, so many people were lining up literally to ask us to do work for them. And it was so exciting. It was an opportunity I had to take. It was a risk I had to take. And it was a risk. It was scary. And I remember my aunt, who I love so much. She sadly just passed away a couple months ago. It's been really hard. She's like a mom to me. But I remember her saying once, and she's so practical, like just one of the most practical people you'll ever meet. She's like, Kelsey, events businesses are usually like, the first ones to go down in a like a recession or something. And I'm like, all right, lady, like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, here we are, fast forward, 3.5 years, 4 years later from when she said that in the middle of a pandemic. But anyway, all that to say, it just became a question of, do I want to risk and choose myself? And I think that for me at that time, choosing East Olivia was choosing myself. I think Anthro
Yeah.
also could have been, like, neither path was right or wrong. I was just like, okay, like this also, I, what a big part of it is too, is that I used to struggle with sort of feeling like working with the ephemeral is a little vain. Like, okay, we're just gonna, and with visuals in general, it's like, okay, we're gonna make these things beautiful, and then we're just gonna walk away from them, or we're gonna throw them away. Maybe we compost them sometimes, but you know what I'm saying? It's like we create these beautiful things, and then the next day they're gone, and what's the point of that? It's like very sort of self-indulgent. And then I read this book. Well, first of all, I heard a podcast by Krista Trippett. Are you familiar with Krista Trippett and On Being, that podcast?
I've heard of it, but I have not listened to it.
Oh, you'll have to get into it.
Yeah.
Being a podcaster yourself, I'll have to send you this episode. But
Yeah.
um, Krista Trippett did an interview with this guy, John O'Donohue, and he's an Irish mystic. And the entire episode is about beauty, and um, and how as human beings we actually are hardwired. We need beauty. We need beauty the same way we need air, water, nutrition. You walk outside and there is nature. Nature is beauty. Nature is evidence of our actual need as human beings to be experiencing and being amongst beauty. And I think also when that clicked for me too, I found so much more purpose in what I was doing. Like, oh, that's why I'm driven to do this. That's why I want to find these like insane, I don't even know, insane like Westminster Abbey roses that to us as floral designers can seem like, oh, okay, like I've seen that 100 times. But the average person has never seen that. They've never seen a
Right.
rose that looks gray, that is kind of beige and also a little purple. Like it's mind blowing. And so once I made that connection too, I think it also fueled me more with my own work, because I felt like I had a really strong purpose. And sharing beauty, especially ephemeral beauty, is such a privilege, what we get to do, the product that we get to see, the things we get to experience. I literally feel like it's like my duty in life to share that with other people. And so it, so no, I guess it really wasn't about volume of business or profitability or any of those things, which are all really important things. But we did have a lot of demand. And so, financially I could tell that I was probably a good bet. But it was still a risk. I mean,
Yeah.
giving up a job at a major corporation, a job that many people would be so excited to have. It definitely, it was calculated. But I think once I really like got centered and connected to that um, desire to share beauty as um, a human need. It's not a luxury. Beauty is not a luxury. It's a human need. That I think really just made everything sort of sing. I was like, okay, this is what I need to be doing.
And I love that. I don't think I've ever heard it put quite that way, but I relate to that statement. I mean, I know in moving up here to Nashville and it's like the mountains and I actually I felt like I went from a place where fall was 2 weeks to fall was 6 weeks and I'm
And where are
like
you from?
we were living in middle Georgia and
Okay.
so we're used to cotton and pecan trees and peach trees and all of that. I
Yep.
mean, major agricultural area. And so coming up here to the mountains, and it's not really that mountainous, but it's mountain still, and seeing fall color is just I don't know. I can relate to that, especially after
Yeah. I
just this
mean,
past season.
and you guys have it's a little bit shorter in Nashville, but even just living on the East Coast now, because I'm from California, and now I go back to California as a floral designer. I'm like, this is so beautiful. What is even happening? Was I blind when I lived here before?
Your
Like,
eyes
how
have
did I
been
not?
opened.
Yeah, I was like, how? And the foraging. Don't even get me started on the
Yeah,
foraging that is
yeah,
possible when you live in California. Um, but
that's
anyway,
funny.
the being on the East Coast and having that change, it really does. It makes you more connected to nature. You sort of have to be. Uh,
Interesting.
and because so much of your daily life is so much more impacted by it, which is
Sure.
nice sometimes.
Well, one thing I wanna unpack a little bit, and you've touched on two things that kind of make me curious. One, how many employees do you have now?
Um, well, full time, I believe there are 10 of us, maybe 11 now. Uh, I really should probably like, it's so funny. Maybe some other business owners can relate. It's like certain things you just feel like you should know the answer to, like how many
Well,
full-time employees you have. But it's
it's
just kind of crazy the number of the number of things that are in my head each day. I'm like, ooh, where are we at?
yeah,
But we also, and I think part of that too is because we also employ so many part-timers and freelancers
right,
that really feel like they're a full part of our team.
right,
So there's about 10, 11 of us full time. And then part time, there's like another probably 6 to 7 core people. And then maybe even more like 10. And then freelancers, it's like at any given time, we're employing 15 to 50 different freelancers. And that's when events are high. Now, it has not been like that. I want to be real clear. It's
well,
not been like
sure,
that through all of COVID. But in the last couple of months, events have really come back. And pre-COVID, we had a much smaller team. Um, and yeah, so I'm really excited. We have our staff holiday party coming up the on Wednesday, the night after next. I'm like, oh wow, we're going to be hosting like 20 people, and that's we had a last holiday party we didn't have one last year, was an intimate dinner at my house. I couldn't do that this time, and I feel so so grateful for that.
I love that. One of the things I know in reading, doing a little research and on your website and stuff, you have this phrase "people over everything"
Mm.
that you use, and I'm curious, is that more about the employees or about the customers? I mean, I'd like to think it's about both, but I mean, is that really what is that mantra all about?
Well, it started with the employees. It started with really wanting to create an environment, whether you're full time or freelance, that puts people not even necessarily first, but at the core of the decisions that we make. And I also have to say, like, we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Like,
Sure.
I would love nothing more than to create the perfect experience for everybody all the time, both clients and freelancers, um, but and employees, of course, full-time employees. I will say that our commitments, right, and the choices that I've made have been directly reflective of that value. So, for instance, if you work at East Olivia, you have healthcare, 401k, and paternity leave, amongst other benefits. Um, that for a business of ours, and I'd done that since the beginning. So I basically wouldn't bring on, I didn't want to bring on people if I couldn't provide those things. And it was something that when the pandemic hit, I mean, it became a real question of like, can we continue to do this?
Sure.
But for me, if I couldn't provide jobs that actually allowed people to be able to plan to have a career here, um, I don't know, it just didn't feel right to me, and it's something that is really important to me. So people over everything really started with the employees and wanting to provide um, living wages and benefits, because if you don't have those things in New York City, you, I mean, you can live, but it's only a certain kind of living, right? But our commitment to excellence within our work is also another way that those two things are kind of synonymous to me. It's like if people are going to be over everything, like, and first and foremost taking care of ourselves and our team, that's what makes us the most optimal to take care of our clients and to create work that is
Beauty.
excellent and
Yeah.
to create beauty. Exactly. And so, I'm like pretty particular about how I want things to look. I think probably most of us as designers are, right? Um, and I think that's something that clients really appreciate about us, and that's part of how we put them first. Is a lot of times, like, my clients are brands, so it's not so much.
Mm.
Oftentimes, it's not about my creative expression as East Olivia. We have our own brand, we have our own things that. I have my own things as a designer that are my favorite things, but my job as a designer within East Olivia is to bring a client's vision to life, to bring a brand to life, and through the ephemeral, through beauty, and so sometimes that means that to put that person first, I'm putting myself second, or I'm shifting a little bit of how that all balances out, but it's all with the same intention and same motivation. So and I think the other thing too is that, I don't know, it's a little um you can say sometimes, well, if it's people over everything, like, shouldn't everything be comfortable and cushy and wonderful? But oftentimes, excellence requires us to stretch and requires us to go beyond comfort. And I know that for myself and everybody that works for East Olivia, we've all had to go through that as a small company through the pandemic. And so I think there are things you could probably argue either are the best or aren't the best for employees, like, if based on if you have a different lens or perspective than I do. But a lot of times what I'm looking at is, am I running a company that I feel has integrity and that takes care of its employees, takes care of its talent? That to me is the most important thing. And if we can get that right, I think everything else falls into place.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that, and I appreciate that those thoughts, because I feel like so many times employers view employees as a means to an end, and they don't fully take in the bigger picture, which in the end I think ends up helping them. I mean,
Hmm.
I think in the long run there is a much more profound impact by having that kind of mindset when you're working with your team, and as you're hiring, and as you're executing, and no, none of us are perfect when it comes to it, but at least have being aware and having goals are the first steps that we all
Right.
need.
And
So
it's a balance. It's like, in some ways you have to be careful. There's very strong opinions on both sides. If you want to say where you work is like a family, yes or no. I mean, it's sort of just like, I think it's semantics at the end of the day. You could probably argue it either way. It could be healthy or not healthy. But you know part of building a strong team is also building a team that is capable of receiving feedback, that doesn't take everything personally, but holds enough space to connect with each other personally. um, And so I think, creating, like, right now, the topic of culture and, what are the core values of East Olivia is a big, topic for us, is where our events business has picked back up. Now we have a direct consumer business, more people are getting hired. How do we uphold and maintain those values? And what are those values if we had to write them out on paper, right? And all of that's really important. It's just, it's I don't know, it's something that I think, uh it's impossible to be perfect at, but if you like, it is really important for it to be a strong part of what you're doing day to day, because without that, uh it's just sort of like, why are we doing this? If it's not going to be a healthy environment.
Right.
But and you have so many people bringing their raw talent to help make a dream. Like, this started out with me just having a dream of wanting to make something, right? And then other people have, but I've always had this idea that, I've never wanted it to, it's not called Kelsea Olivia Designs for a reason. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But I always envisioned East Olivia as being a place that would allow other people to come in and take their ideas that they're really excited about and give them the opportunity to, it's like, we don't do very many weddings. We do almost no weddings. We take a select
Really?
few. Yes, really. We do almost no weddings. Take a select few every year. I'm not passionate about weddings personally. I'm really passionate about weddings for people that I love, and we've done a few of those, or some clients come in with these just like really exciting ideas. We had a wedding earlier this year that was incredible. It was so creative and so fun, but we don't do a lot of weddings, because it's not a big passion of mine. But if there was somebody that was so passionate about weddings and they wanted to come work for us and build out we have so many brides that want us to do their wedding. And I love the idea of being able to build a company that would have the capacity to bring somebody in to let them take their dream and make it happen. I feel like that's actually, for those of us who want to build a small business or a business within the floral industry that is beyond a specific niche that we're excited about, and both are beautiful, necessary things. But I feel like for those of us that want to go beyond that, it's our responsibility to be really aware of where is that talent and excitement, and where can we create opportunities that then will be a perfect fit for somebody to come in and want to do that. So, I don't know, maybe someday we'll have a wedding department ran by somebody who's just so stoked to run it. I really want to give somebody that job.
Well,
Not
I
me though.
love that thought, because I mean it's again, it's outside the box. I think the thing that excites me about what you just said is that you are open to growing your business, given the right people and the right energy
Mhm.
and their level and their passion. So many times, as an owner, like they may have a definite brand in mind, or they may have a definite, like, this is what we are, and we're not open to anything else.
Right.
Meanwhile, the doors are shaking because there's herds of people that want to come in and have you do their weddings, or have,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? It's like that
Right.
part of it is just kind of a little crazy. And
Well, and
so,
there
yeah,
might be a lot of designers that, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
it's kind of like, which, I mean, it's like there might be designers out there who absolutely love every part of the process except for running their own business, because running your own business is really hard. And
right.
very many there are not very many career paths in this industry that you can count on unless you're willing to take the risk to run your own business. And I just think it's so odd. Like, are there any other, I mean, how many other industries are like that? They're so, especially for something that's agricultural, like, they're really, we've been very much like boxed into these certain ways that you can work in the industry. And there are definitely companies out there that have full-time floral designers. And I don't know how many of them provide benefits, but there certainly aren't enough. Like, there should be more.
Yeah.
Like,
It's definitely a challenging, and then also a living wage. I mean, that's the other side of it.
yeah.
Because so many times, and it's hard. It's a hard choice to make. I think in this day and age, after the pandemic, when it's so hard to find good people, I think now people are just used to paying a little more because, or I say that and people might be pulling voodoo dolls out on me because, they might be like, no, no, no. But it's like,
Labor's gone up. I mean, for any, whether you're a freelancer, you've had to raise your prices because cost of living has gone up. But if you're a business owner hiring freelancers, even if you're not in the floral industry, I mean, labor's gone up. Some of my labor's gone up 50%.
yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, it is a lot. But in a way, it makes me question sometimes if we go back, maybe we weren't paying them enough to begin with.
Exactly. Well, and I agree because, and I think that wages have needed to increase in our industry. And that's why I love that you went there with this, because I agree with that. The first time I heard it, I was like, I don't know, as a business owner, how am I going to make this work? Right. Because we're always thinking, at least most human beings, unless you're just, I don't know, really extra good, but most of the time we're thinking about our own perspectives. And so for me, as somebody who hires a lot of freelancers, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to meet my other bottom lines? Right. If I'm not able to pay this. But as I thought about it more and had some other conversations, with other designers and business owners, I was like, yeah, this really is something in our industry that has been needing to change. Wages have needed to go up. But now what's we have to do is like, that money still has to be paid for. So now that means the clients have to help pay for it too, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a reckoning we need to have in our industry. But
Hmm.
now what I'll be really interested to see is like, um, I just really am hopeful that we'll be able to, all of us, communicate throughout that wheel of like, these are all the changes that need to happen, and it's worth it. The work is worth it.
Hmm.
Having florals be a part of your events and hiring those really talented freelancers are worth it. But we also have to account now in our budgets for what those rates actually equate to in talent and experience, because
Yeah,
I
good
used to
point.
pay freelancers, you know what I mean? Like I used to pay freelancers a certain amount, and I'm like, I knew I was paying within this range for a freelancer, and they're worth this much. And now with inflation and different things, and I think a good reckoning in our industry. But I think from the planning side of it as a business owner, and I feel like most floral designers that hire a lot of freelancers are dealing with this too, and also other industries. A lot of people have moved. Like, I don't really know anybody that as a business owner that relies on freelancers as part of a big part of their business, that hasn't seen a complete shift. Like,
Right.
everybody's moved. It's like totally new. The rates are different. The talent and skill set associated to the rates are different. It's kind of like having to learn and recreate it all together at the same time. So I think it's really great that we're talking about this, because it's important that rates are increasing. Um, and then we also need to be able to have open conversations about, okay, how do we still make that work so that our businesses can sustain,
Right, because a lot of times, that's the fearful side of being the business owner is,
Mhm.
especially when you're starting out, you're like, okay, well, that's going to drive the cost of my quotes up,
Mhm.
and then how does that translate? If not everyone is doing that, then I'm going to seem like the expensive one, and this person's not. And I mean, I
Mhm.
realize it is a juggling, and it is a thing that I think everyone needs to be aware of, and it's like I know I've told wedding designers before or business owners that I'm like, it's not unreasonable. It's if everything else in the chain is more expensive,
Mhm.
then why are we selling not only ourselves short, but the people that are making it possible for us to grow our business? I mean,
Yep.
that's ultimately,
Which is why pricing fairly is really, really important. It's not just important to yourself, but it's important to the entire industry.
yeah,
But it takes it, and that's how we support each other as peers. And I mean, but it's hard. It's not easy. It requires more work from everybody. But I think the more that we can have open conversations about it, the better. And for us, we're really spending a lot of time right now talking about like, okay, how do we better equip our team to have a conversation with clients that we need to have and say, hey, We're actually in the middle of a worldwide flower shortage. You can't, I mean, you can't get as much as what was easy to get whenever you want it as you can now. And if you can get it, it's more expensive. Um, and I think just having honest, and you say it in a way that's not completely negative, but I think there are upfront conversations. And because we're not the only industry dealing with it, every single industry is dealing with
Right.
it. It makes those conversations a little easier. But we're really having to look at our events business really picked up, which is great, but we're still sort of like, wait a second, how is this all balancing out? Are we profitable? Are we making the best decisions right now in the interest of like re-strengthening this business from the fallout of COVID? Because we lost a lot during COVID. And we're still healing from that financially.
Right.
And we've really had to take a long, hard look at how we're pricing things. We've had to talk to our peers, talk to our vendors, and make sure that we're doing our best to be able to just uphold that sort of, I don't know, industry standard. It comes from us. We create it every day when we make choices to decide what we're going to charge for our work, and that can be a hard thing to figure out. I remember, speaking of Amy Nicole, I was like, when I get coaching with Amy Nicole, this was years ago, she's going to teach me how to price stuff once and for all. And then I'm never going to have to do this much math again. And of course, there are some formulas, but like anything that we thought we knew has now probably changed since the pandemic. So what I learned from working with Amy was that there's really no shortcut. You really do have to do the work to figure out what you're worth and what markups make sense for your business. And that can be scary. Like I wasn't like a math whiz. I didn't even graduate college. I'm like, all this stuff is, I don't know how to figure this out. I think pricing can be really intimidating for people, So I
Especially
just
in a
think it's
city like New York, because, or in LA or some of these places where, rent is really high or different things are a little more challenging from, logistics
I feel
and
like the
things.
flowers though are more expensive and okay, I gotta say, and I could be shopping in the wrong places. Not wrong places, but I could be shopping maybe at the more expensive places. But when I have been, in the say like in the South, um, I feel like I'm paying a more premium sometimes especially than what I pay in LA. Now, studio space and those sort of things might be much less expensive. But
You're
I'm
talking about
actually curious.
flowers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's a great point, and that's probably a topic for our podcast all by itself.
yeah,
But when people are their businesses start in like LA or San Francisco or New York, or
hmm
Miami, where those are the ports of entry for flowers, or like in California, where all the farms bring their product, there's a
right,
lot of expenses that aren't that you don't have to pay. Like
right,
you don't have to pay for a plane to get your flowers from A to B, or you don't
right.
have to pay for someone to go to the airport to pick it up because you just go to the market to get it, or it's delivered. There are a lot of other expenses associated with it, for us to be able to have products like that, and also it just depends on if you are choosing to have the higher quality flowers, like we were
hmm
talking about. And I don't mean quality as but like, okay, Japanese sweet peas maybe, which of course are the import, versus, maybe something else. So you know what I mean? It's like those flowers are just more expensive. Well, now this year, on top of all that, the freight has made everything even more crazy. And
hmm
so, we're hearing it from everybody from candle
Well,
companies,
and
vases, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Bases. I mean, don't like we launched our Forever Florals mostly with inventory we had.
Hmm.
Uh and by the time we ran out of vases, and this is the height of the pandemic, we were just screwed. I mean, it was so hard to source vases, and it still can be now. I mean, and then I feel like some of these companies like Accent Decor, I know they just blew up in the pandemic. They became even bigger. I've talked to some of their sales reps, and they're great and like so helpful, but 9 times out of 10 they're sold out of whatever you need because they have such high demand for everything.
Well,
And
and then you
so
have the shipping issues,
mhm.
because even, I mean, even a shipping container, which might have cost, I don't know, I'm going to say some number and someone's going to say he's an idiot, but I mean,
Is
like,
this what
let's,
happens when you have that many that
sometimes, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
$4,000 or $5,000 to ship a container is now like 25 to 35,000. So then you've got the issues. I mean, when I was in LA last summer, and I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but I saw the long line of boats just waiting to get to the dock.
Yep.
And it's a crazy situation. And anyway, I think things are
Which is
better, but
yeah.
it's definitely
But which
not
is why
100%.
transparency with your clients is super important. And I think that, and I could be, I could be wrong about this, but to me, at least what makes the most sense is like transparency with your clients, at least in this business right now, is what supports everybody else and all the other moving parts, because then you can be realistic. I think sometimes if we undercut ourselves, it's so funny. It's like, ask for what you're worth. No, but really ask for what you're worth, because if you don't, it also impacts your peers. It impacts the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
And I have found that, clients, obviously nobody wants to hear that stuff, everything is more expensive, but we also all know it's more expensive. And it hasn't been, it's not like I've been, getting a ton of pushback. It may mean that the scope of work has to lessen a little bit, but we get creative. And if I am able to source, say, maybe something in this project that saves me a lot more money than what I had planned, like, I'll pass that savings on to the client, rather than just, take that all for ourselves, which I think that, um, being able to do that with product and saying like, look, I'm going to be as transparent even with you as possible, to like, this is really, it's like, I'm buying carnations, some of them almost $3 a stem. Like, what year is this? I don't understand what planet I live on. But also then if I'm able to really like secure something that saves the client a lot of money, I don't know, it just helps. It's like we're all helping each other out where we can. um Otherwise it's just going to be harder to sustain longer, and hopefully like get through whatever post COVID season we're living in right now.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, and there's a lot of questions I want to ask you, and I feel like we're running out of time. The having various employees, various events going on, different, you have different facets of your business. How do you manage to keep everything? And I hate to use the term on brand, but how do you keep everything, you know, keep everything going the right direction when you may have, several things going on the same weekend or the same week or the same time, same day?
Well, I I don't know, magic. I'm just kidding. Sometimes it feels like that. I actually had an interview today with somebody, and I had asked her, why she was interested in working for us, and she basically was talking about just that. She's like, if I see an installation, I know if it's East Olivia. I can just
Right.
tell. And I think that
Which is a huge accomplishment. I
it
mean,
is.
really.
It
Yeah.
is. I love it. It's something really special, and it really is. Um, it really comes from like, I'm basically obviously I'm the face of the brand. I'm sitting here having this conversation with you. I'm very passionate about supporting other small businesses, and I don't mind speaking and doing interviews. I think all that stuff is really fun. But I'm I'm just one person. Like, there are so many creative people that come together to bring this brand to life, and it it is that ever moving, ever evolving group that together accomplishes that. It's so fun, and I think it's that mixed with like probably a lot of my neuroses and being very specific, and I think they like learn the things that I really like pay attention to. But they're just things that they're just values and perspectives that I've learned and been taught from other people and have like trained my eye on and things like that. And and what I love is that it's not just my perspective. It's our perspective together, and like working with a group of people that always want to, that always are pushing for excellence and always want to do their best work
Right.
and always want to like stretch a little bit. Like this year we did all of the holiday decorations at Chelsea Market in New York City, which I don't know if you are
Hmm.
familiar with Chelsea Market, but it's a pretty big shopping center. Our team did, and the cities weren't just flowers, they were like creative fabrication. I mean, it was so fun. And to go there and see what we've created, it's just like, my hands didn't touch any of those things. I worked on the creative, but this team and this visual expression that we put forth is a representation of us all like working together, um and having this just like commitment to excellence and this excitement to share um outrageous beauty with the world, however we can, you
Mm.
know
Oh, there's a T-shirt in there. East
yeah.
Olivia, outrageous beauty. Yeah, I love
Yes,
it. I love it. I love
definitely.
it. Um, I know because you've mentioned it many times already that with the pandemic, you went from being an event, or you went from all these projects to almost nothing literally overnight. Had to be, I mean, I know that a lot of people have shared pandemic stories, but I feel like you have pivoted through that in a way that kind of kept you afloat. And I'm just curious, if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about that part of your journey.
I don't mind at all. Yeah, I feel like the pandemic it's
I
just
mean,
brought up all the time everywhere now. It's just like our I don't know, our barometer for so many things. Um, but yeah, I mean, so we were heading into, I thought 2020 was going to be my year. I was one of those. We were heading into the beginning of 2020 in just an incredible place. Our business had grown 300% to the year before. We were on track to grow like 500% or more this upcoming year. We were doing in the first quarter what we had done in the entire year in 2020. And then March happened and it all just went away overnight. This is the tried and true story of almost anybody in the events business. But we had been selling our dried and preserved arrangements, are what we call our forever florals,
mhm.
at Create and Cultivates and some other various events pre-pandemic. And we had actually uh, designed Urban Stem's first collection, that they released of preserved and dried arrangements. We designed that first collection, was in collaboration with East Olivia, which was very fun and was very successful. So we had done those things, and I've been working with dried and preserved for many, many years, especially coming from like retail display. That's how I first got into it. Because nothing really survives in a retail environment. It's just really sad, but it just really doesn't. So preserved flowers were great for that. But anyway, pandemic hit, and I knew that shutdown was imminent. It had been happening in other cities. I knew, we just all knew it was coming to New York. And so we brought the team together, everybody that was full time, and we came to my home studio and we designed a collection of our preserved florals. So one of the things that I do with our dried and preserved is we rent them out.
Which I think is
We put
fascinating. I mean, I've never
Yeah,
heard that before. So
really, yeah. I
yeah.
mean, and this is something it's just call it a tip or trick if you want. Feel free to, it's one of those things. It's like not a big secret. To me, preserved is very expensive, dried is very expensive. Even if it's foraging, you're using your time, which is expensive. And why I just can't I just have never, even with fresh flowers. I mean, I used to get in like fights with my husband about like wanting to save flowers after events. Like, I don't ever want to throw anything away. I mean, we have the privilege of working with this ephemeral product. Like, let it let's enjoy it as much as we possibly can. Like, I'm not
Right.
going to take all these flowers after an event and throw them away. You're crazy. Um, and so anyway, we came together, because we rented out our dried and preserved, and because I was always building on our inventory for dried and preserved for installations and upcoming work, we had this amazing amount of product that we could work with. And since we had been selling our forever arrangements already, we kind of already had an idea of how we wanted to present this, how we could present this. So we designed a collection, shot it, launched a website under a week. We did all of this,
Oh my goodness.
including packing kits for the individual designers to take home so that they could design from the safety of their homes. And that was just that's how we started our online direct to consumer shop. And I mean, we wouldn't have I'm sure that we would have come back. I'm pretty determined and resilient person, but if we hadn't have had that, I mean, there's no way that we would have we would have made it through the pandemic. I mean, there's more people on our team now than there were pre the pandemic. And I don't want to make it sound like it's been easy or it's like been a cash cow, because it's a totally different business model, by the way. Like with events, you're getting paid, you get a deposit, you do this design work, and then you collect, right? With direct to consumer, it's not like that. Now, the first time we released a collection, we had these things, so that was great. We're making money on product we have. But now, if I want to sell something, I have to go buy it. I don't have anybody contractually bound to buy these arrangements, so it's a whole other animal. But we built something of value that we're really, really excited about, that has its own, I don't know, its own life. And I have a lot of dreams and aspirations for building out Kelsea Olivia. But it was literally what saved our business at the height of the pandemic. It's crazy. I don't know what we would have done without it, truly.
Hmm. Well, and now it's a whole nother revenue stream, really, and
It is.
it's interesting. It's an interesting way to kind of help grow your business. I know that's always the challenge, even without these unusual times, is, how do you diversify your revenue stream so that way
Yeah.
you don't have all your eggs in one basket, It's
Well,
hard.
like my Aunt Rhoda said, watch what happens to your business if there's a recession. I'm like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Meanwhile, she's the smartest lady in the room, usually. And she wasn't saying that to discourage me. She was saying it to, I don't know, almost like an omen of some kind, like, be prepared, or this could be a thing you're not thinking of. But wait, what was the question you asked?
No, I was just saying that, it's great. It wasn't really a question. It was more just, I think it's really smart on your part. You've been able to
Oh, to
create an
diversify.
additional, yeah.
Well, and that's what, like, the thing is, I mean, I always wanted to do that. And we did the one for Urban Stems, which was awesome. And it was so fun. But, when we first started talking to Urban Stems, I'm like, yeah, I don't have a desire to be my own direct consumer or sell product. I don't have a desire to do that. Like, who has the time? We're busy with events. But
Right.
right, and the world changed, and then our priorities shifted. So I don't know. I hope that we would have launched that, but I don't know what have happened. We probably would have been so busy. One of the things the pandemic did is it was reactive in a way, but it forced you to create something. We all had to create something. And it almost, even though we were reactive because we had no choice in the pandemic, it forced many of us to be active, to have to really like decide, okay, what am I going to do with the limited resources that I have? And our team didn't know anything about sourcing vases. I mean, we're event designers. We go to Jamali, we go to B&J, we go to Accent Decor, we get what we need. And that's that. We never had to think about the origin or what was going on in the country at the time. Like, I'm so proud of my team. I'm proud of all of us, because we had to diversify in a way and really shift. Everybody had shift roles. It's pretty incredible. And it's just like a reminder of what the human spirit is capable of when, put between a rock and a hard place. And at the end of the day, just like you're saying, we, even though we have so much healing to do from the pandemic, I think it's the reason I say that, and I make such a point of saying that, is because I think Instagram and, even just if you go on your website, and you can go on somebody's website, see all these wonderful accomplishments. Like, it's not that we're not doing great. We have so much, and we now, on the other side of the pandemic, I feel like we have an even more exciting, more valuable company than we did. But it is not with scaling is not without massive sacrifice. And I don't feel like as small, people that are part of the small business community or entrepreneurs talk enough about scaling a business and how expensive it is, especially if you're bootstrapped. Right now we're self-funded, and it's incredibly challenging, and I just don't want anybody to think that like it's an easy ride, not because we deserve like extra gold stars, but just because it is really that hard. But if it's what you want, it can really be worth it, and like the fighting the good fight is worth it, but it is a fight, especially post COVID.
Hmm. When you started your business, did you have the dream to create a bigger business, like kind of what you're you're on that trajectory for, or what were you thinking when you started? Because sometimes I feel like a lot of times people, um I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, Kristen Alpaw, and we were talking about like when people from House of Stems and yeah, so
Yeah, House of Stems.
when you are on, when you start that business, do you think that this is my goal to be this big company? A lot of them don't, and then just things evolve, and you end up
Mhm.
getting away from some of the things that you really loved from the very beginning,
Mm.
and you know what I mean. And
Well, yeah,
as a
that's
business owner,
that's yeah, that's a way of looking at it, and that's certainly part of the experience. I think, well, one, I'll just say I didn't have a vision of the company being super big. At first when I started out, I just, we're hoping people would even just hire me, like think that I was capable enough to do the work on my own, much less
right?
like having a team. Um, and it grew rather rapidly in terms of like, okay, I would probably, if somebody asked me how big I want the company to be, it would, I would say, I don't know, maybe it would be cool if like someday it was like 15 to 30, maybe, but now I think, one of the things that has really changed since the pandemic has been just my overall perspective in terms of what needs to change in this industry, and like
Mm.
where there are areas of impact that could use different voices. And so now my dreams are a lot bigger. I know that's kind of like a weird way to get to it, but now
No,
I'm
but I
like,
appreciate that.
I'd love to have, I'd love to have a company that employs hundreds of people, not because I want, and it's not that I don't want East Olivia to be like the biggest name in the floral industry, but like that's not the reason why. The reason why is because I would love to be part of shifting the floral industry to support more long-term careers, and for people to be able to be a part of this industry in a way that doesn't like require so much bootstrapping and so much. And I guess I could be, maybe I'm projecting, I don't know if it's really a pain point in our industry, but it seems like it is. um it seems like it's sort of like start your own business, do your own thing, or go work at your local flower shop. There's nothing in between, and there's no real place to go from there if you want to, um like be a master of your field, or you want to be, I don't know, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's just
Yeah.
a, it requires so many of us to just begin our, uh, to be responsible fully for a business that then also has to employ other people, if you want to like, have a financially like, um abundant career in this industry. And I don't think it should be like that,
Yeah.
you know?
It kind of, I don't know, when you're saying that, it made me think you're trying to create, in a way, what anthropology was for you, a place where people could come and be creative and figure it out for themselves while, almost getting their own wings, and whether they choose to stay and evolve inside
Mhm.
your corporate climate or culture, or whether they go out on their own. I mean, you don't hear many people talk that way. Is that a fair way to think of it, or is that
I
my?
mean, I've never thought of it that way, but I totally see what you're saying. And I don't know if that was ever, yeah, I can't speak to like Anthropology as a company, whether or not that is their,
Oh, I don't.
um,
Yeah, I don't mean
you
that
know,
that, but what it was for you.
but, but what it was for me was, and the people that I worked for, like, that's the thing. I'm also like, oh, like Anthropology is such a great company to work for. Like, the reason I had such an amazing experience is because of the people that I worked for. I mean,
Mm.
I learned from some of the most talented people I know. And they, know, none of them do florals. But I don't know. So I just feel so lucky in that regard. And so, yeah, I think that bringing talent together, and talent isn't just solely in design, right? It's also like, I mean, I have people on my team that some of their like superpowers are how they like network and work with clients, and that's the thing that really lights them up and makes them so excited. And for other people, it's like about marketing and what you were asking about, like how do we so consistently portray this visual voice and brand? Like that also has to do with how great our marketing department is, because she has, Janina, who runs our marketing department, has been a part of creating the ethos of who we are. And that's, I don't know, it's so fun for a brand to be an expression of so many people.
Yes.
It's really fun.
Well, I always like to sort of wrap up our chats with that moment where I ask for that piece of advice that either maybe you wish you had heard that you know now, or you'd like to just share in general, knowing the path you've been on.
Yeah, so I'll share something that I heard a couple weeks ago that has really been resonating with me, especially as we have been picking back up in events and our business feels like it's growing again, right? So I don't know if any of you out there are a fan of the Dare to Lead podcast by Brene Brown, but it's really, really amazing. And if are an entrepreneur of any sort, it's so valuable. But she had Brene Brown had this guy on, Adam, or no, James James Clear. He wrote Atomic Habits, and he has this quote, and it is, "You do not rise to the level of your goals; you fall to the level of your systems." And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh man."
Wow. Ouch.
I was like, dang it. Okay. So I'll say it again. Like, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And just as a business owner and the growing pains that we're in right now at East Olivia, it's hard to grow, it's challenging, and systems are typically something that when you go to a company that's been around for a long time, that they have in place. Like, we have to be the authors, the originators of our systems. And it's really challenging. It's really hard. Like, everybody on our team is so amazing because they all have the spirit of people that are excited to work for startups, and startups are innately a bit chaotic and things change. And we're establishing systems all the time. And so I think, to me, the reason I love that quote, and that like piece of advice, is that I think sometimes it's a little sexier to think about or to dream about, like, what are our goals? What do we want to do? What do we want to impact? And that's important. The why is important. But I don't think I ever really understood how important or valuable the systems were until our business really started growing. Because when you have a couple clients and it's you and one of your friends, and you're, even if you're moonlighting, like, there's a lot you can do, just a couple of people. But when things really start to pick up and people are relying on you, and you sign people's paychecks and you provide health insurance for them, or you're responsible for hiring a lot of freelancers and creating an experience that's good for the people that work for you and good for the client. Like, the responsibility, it requires more. And what I'm really learning is that systems and intentionality are the things that actually are the integrity of the company, versus like the goals and aspirations. While they're still important, what I've been doing is shifting more to focusing and pushing our priorities onto those things, so that not just on the outside, but on the inside too, we can, really feel confident about the experience we're creating for people. So anyway,
I love
uh,
that. So I
yeah.
just want to clarify something, because if people haven't heard that kind of terminology, which I'm sure most people have, but maybe they don't think of it in the way that, like, that statement is a huge statement. And people don't always think, they think about, oh, how I buy my flowers or how I process my flowers, or that they don't always think about other systems that I'm thinking about. And I'm like,
Hmm.
like, how do we market? How do we, like, onboard clients? How do we, I mean, I'm trying to think of different
Oh my
systems
gosh.
that people don't think of normally, because you're at a different level than maybe some other businesses, smaller businesses might be at. But,
But
like,
it's important to talk about what those pain points are, and what, because those things don't just magically happen on their own. I mean,
right.
even just if you think about how many freelancers and vendors we work with, it's like all of our stuff at Chelsea Market, half of it was like fabrication builds, like custom builds. And we have designers on, on our team that are then directing them down the chain. Who's paying them? Who's collecting their W-9? Who's getting their workers comp insurance? Who's checking their COI for load-in? I mean, the logistics and the business admin, those those things, I just don't think enough people like talk about them. And so when you were even asking like, oh, what do you wish somebody had told you, or just even like advice you wish you knew, it's sort of like, even just that idea that like systems are so important, because when you're a little bit smaller, you just, the scale of those things, you just don't have to worry about as much. And
Well, you're doing it all
um
yourself, in a
yeah,
lot of
and you
cases.
can,
Yeah,
you can.
but if you're trying to grow, you've got to be able to have a system so you can delegate those tasks in a way that frees you up to do other things. So,
Right.
mm,
Well, yeah, and I think, for those of us out there that are running a business and growing one, that are designers, and I think you were kind of saying this a little earlier too, is like when you were talking about your chat with Kristen, it's like, how do you make sure at the end of the day you haven't completely lost touch with what inspired you to be doing this in the first place? But I think what's
mm,
different for me is that I'm passionate about growing the business too. Like, I mean, I love flowers, and I learned this about myself. Like, I have to make sure a couple times a month I'm just making something, if I don't get to be hands-on enough in events, because oftentimes we're running multiple events in multiple cities, and instead of getting to be a part of the installation, I'm directing 3 different installations, giving everybody feedback in different cities. But if
which
I
just
don't touch
blows my
flowers,
mind.
it's really fun though. It's really fun, but it is a little crazy. But I have to make sure that I am staying in touch with the medium in a way that feels right for me, and that like feeds me creatively.
Sure.
And sometimes that's just going to the market and getting some flowers, and making sure on a Sunday that I make something, and it may never see the light of day, but as long as I'm just getting the time to work with it, it's so helpful. So I think that's important. You kind of have to learn what your toolbox is to make sure you don't get too out of touch, because that's what happened to me in the music industry. I started in music because I loved music and I loved going to concerts, and now it's like, nah, I don't really like doing that anymore. I got really burnt out. I don't even really love going to shows anymore.
Mm.
It's just, it
Well,
kind of, I it sometimes if we overdo it in a field, if we don't stay connected to the why, we get burnt out.
Well, I don't know how you managed to do it, but you managed to bring this episode full circle by talking about your music in your background. So amazing! Thank you so much for your time, Kelsey, and thank
Yeah, of
you for
course.
being on the Flower Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. Clearly, I could talk about this stuff forever. So
Me
fun.
too. It's all good.